Welcome back, everybody. Today, let's take a look at Rurouni Kenshin: The Beginning, which recently released on Netflix. So if you're not familiar with Rurouni Kenshin, it was actually a famous anime that released in the 90s and was based off a manga of the same name by Nobuhiro Watsuki. So the general plot line is that we follow an assassin named Kenshin Himura during the Bakumatsu, which is the final days of the revolution in 1860s Japan that led to the Meiji era. And 10 years later, Kenshin has put away his sword, actually uses a reverse-bladed sword with the vow to never kill again. And that's going to be put to the test when he's put up against ghosts from his past that not only threaten him and his loved ones, but also all of Japan. It was essentially a fictional historical piece, because a lot of the characters were loosely based off real-life historical figures, and made for a really awesome show and a very emotional story. So what is this movie that released on Netflix? So The Beginning is essentially the fourth installment of a Rurouni Kenshin movie series. The first three films came out in 2012 and 2014, and this one, The Beginning, as the title implies, is, well, a prequel. It's about Kenshin during his assassin days before he took the vow to never kill again. And the follow-up film was actually released at the same time, Rurouni Kenshin: The Final, which uses that prequel storyline to basically have Kenshin confront his final obstacle before his entire story ends. So would you be able to watch this movie without having seen the previous ones? More or less, yes. I mean, for the most part, it's sort of like your run-of-the-mill samurai film. But if you know the context of the story, you'll get a lot more deeper meaning out of it. Because Kenshin Himura is supposed to be like this smiley samurai, so to see him in his sort of brooding younger state won't really seem all that appealing to you unless you know about this version of him first. I think for a lot of audience members, they're going to watch this movie and think it's sort of like a generic samurai film, which is really too bad because there is a lot of very sharp choreography. The action scenes are very slick in this movie. You can tell a lot of work went into the production, because the main actor for Kenshin, Takuro Sato, was actually very committed to the role. He actually does his own stunts, and he has this philosophy of trying to portray sort of the emotional psyche of the character even through the action scenes. Which meant that he would always play these scenes, action or no action, with all the stunts included from beginning to end without any interruptions, no cuts. Which is a level of commitment you rarely see out of actors. Now, this was originally an anime film, so you are going to see hints of anime influence. Some of the people that Kenshin has to go up and fight against do have a little bit of that anime flair, you know, a little bit of the silly hair or silly costumes or even the silly weapons, but I feel like they're toned down enough that it doesn't seem too ridiculous, you know? For the most part, this looks like a historical piece. Even Kenshin himself, who's supposed to have red hair, really only just has the red tint and has pretty accurate looking clothing. So another big element of the story is finding out how Kenshin got his famous cross-shaped scar. And it's actually a very tragic story. So Kenshin winds up killing one man who was so eager to live that he was able to get this one clean cut on Kenshin's cheek. And he later meets a woman named Tomoe, who he comes to find out was engaged to that very same man. So she's planning vengeance on Kenshin's life, only to, well, slowly and gradually fall in love with him as well. This winds up being a very tragic love story that feeds into the other films. So overall, this was a very aesthetically well-shot, well-made film. But there were some big flaws to it, though. Unfortunately, I do come watching this movie having read the original source material. In fact, this story was actually adapted back in 1999 under the name Samurai X: Trust and Betrayal. It was sort of like a special mini-series that they made after the anime, and they captured the story really well in that animation. And one huge factor they left out is that when Kenshin got that first cut, the scar would keep opening up and bleed, which led to other characters thinking that there was something kind of supernatural to it, like it was cursed or something. Which would explain how he got his second scar a lot more. Because there's this running theory that he gets his second scar to basically kind of counter that curse, but if that first scar wasn't bleeding this whole time, it doesn't really make a lot of sense why he would get the second scar. So I felt like that plot point was one big fuck up on the writer's point, which is really sad to say. The other point to bring up too is that, well, being an Eastern film, I don't think it's really surprising to say the pacing is slower than what Western audiences are used to. This is not the entire film, but there's a lot of essential scenes where it feels like you're waiting for that cut to happen. Like, okay, they said their lines, cut. No, we're gonna keep the camera on them. Okay. Oh well, that was awkward. And then on top of that, they tend to repeat certain information to you a couple of times. So despite a lot of reveals that happen through showing, they wind up telling you about it afterwards anyway, which didn't really make a lot of sense to me and wasted a lot of valuable minutes. But one of the biggest sins though is that sometimes the acting felt very flat. And it sounds like I'm contradicting myself when I said Sato's commitment to his role was really solid. But at the same time though, I understand these characters are going through some intense trauma during a bloody revolution in Japan. But you know, when a character gets cut, you expect there to be a reaction, some kind of expression, even a gasp. They have sort of this flat look on their face like, throughout the entire film. I understand there's a lot of trauma and maybe even some depression going on, so there's a little bit of that broodiness and angst. But you know, if something major happens, I want to see the actors express. There's one character that gets killed off and has no reaction on her face, and it just drove me nuts. Like, oh my god, you just got killed, do something! But again, it was a really solid made film. It just had a couple of big flaws for me for it to really be as good as it could have been. That's why Rurouni Kenshin, the beginning, gets my score of 3 stars. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Have you seen Rurouni Kenshin, the beginning, or anything Rurouni Kenshin related? As you might well have guessed, it's one of my favorite animes of all time. So that's why I'm pretty excited to scrounge up these films and give them a watch. And if you haven't seen any of those movies, what have you been watching lately? What are some of your favorite animes? Comment below, let me know, and stay tuned right here if you all want to see more.